So the man was at the county courthouse in Charlottesville, Virginia this week. Charges against him had just been dismissed. A judge had just ruled there was no evidence the man had committed any crime. The man, he's a house painter. He was told that he was free to leave the courthouse.
Show us a warrant signed by a judge.
Turn him around.
You don't have a warrant.
Sir.
Show us a warrant for his arrest.
We are officers with Homeland Security.
You don't have a warrant signed by a judge.
So what is going on here is that that Trump's Trump's immigration agents here are arresting this man at this courthouse in Virginia. This video was obtained by the venerable newspaper in Charlottesville, the Daily Progress. And again, there are no criminal charges pending against this man. The case against him had just been dismissed. He had shown up at the county courthouse as required, and Trump's immigration agents took that opportunity to grab him. The agents who arrested him were not wearing uniforms. One of them was wearing a mask. The lawyer who represented the man they arrested, the lawyer says the agents did not show any form of ID. They did not present an arrest warrant. They did have handcuffs, though, and they handcuffed this guy and put him in the back of an unmarked van. To everybody who saw what was happening, it looked very much like a kidnapping.
Welcome back to another John podcast. So, this what just happened, guys. For the first time in U.S. history, a sitting president, Trump, publicly demanded the arrest of a federal judge, James Boasberg, after the judge ruled his executive action unconstitutional during impeachment proceedings. The demand turned an already explosive situation into a full-blown constitutional crisis, with no precedent in American history. Now, any president would be frustrated by a ruling like that, but Trump's reaction went far beyond frustration. It went far beyond venting on social media or complaining about activist judges. And here's what makes this so terrifying. This ruling didn't just sit in obscurity, it became ammunition. Lawmakers in those impeachment hearings started citing Boasberg's ruling as evidence that Trump had engaged in impeachable conduct.
And that was actually one of two arrests made by plainclothes, masked immigration agents at that same county courthouse in Virginia this week. The lawyer telling the Daily Progress, quote, "It's horrifying for the person being detained this way. It's horrifying for the community members watching it." And you saw that right away. People came out and protested outside the county courthouse in Charlottesville right after immigration agents showed up there to start taking people. This was just an instant pressure point for this community. It was a pretty big turnout, too. Masks plus no ID equals abduction. I mean, it makes sense in terms of how quickly people were willing to literally take to the streets over this, right? Everybody needs to be able to go to court, no matter what your immigration status is. Maybe you're the victim of a crime. Maybe you're a witness in an important case. Maybe you're a defendant. If people are too scared to come to court now because Trump's immigration agents are lying in wait at court to arrest them, then courts will not be able to function fairly or effectively for anyone. Judges are responsible for the safety of everybody who appears before the court for any reason.
They pointed to it and said, look, even the courts are saying he's violating the Constitution. This isn't just political opposition. This is a judicial finding that he's broken the law. And when Trump saw his executive action being dismantled in the courts and then used against him in impeachment proceedings, he absolutely lost it. Not metaphorically. He reached a breaking point that we have never seen from an American president. Trump took to whatever platform he could find and demanded that Judge Boasberg be arrested. He said the judge should be prosecuted for what Trump called an abuse of power. Now think about what that means. Think about the implications of a president ordering the arrest of a federal judge because that judge issued a ruling he didn't like.
Right? For the safety and security of those people so they can do their lawful business before the court. If Trump's immigration agents are staking out courthouses to grab people, to kidnap people, once they show up to take part in a lawful court proceeding, that stops judges from fulfilling their responsibilities under the law for what happens with their cases and in their courtrooms. Now, this was also a point of tension in Trump's first term. In Trump's first term, he also sent immigration agents to go to try to arrest people at their court appearances. And it was a flashpoint then. State judges have a duty to ensure the safety of the people who appear before them in court, whether as plaintiffs or defendants or witnesses. Well, today, a whole new level. Today, the FBI arrested a county judge in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. According to the FBI, this judge knew that Trump's immigration agents were outside her courtroom waiting to arrest a man who was before her court. They say she sent the immigration agents away from her hearing room and then escorted the man and his lawyer out of the courtroom through a private exit. For that, the Trump administration has arrested her and charged her with 2 felonies. She herself arrested, brought before a federal court, and then released today on her own recognizance. Her attorney says that the judge intends to defend herself vigorously. He says she looks forward to being exonerated. But if this feels like an insane and reckless escalation from the Trump administration arresting a judge,
in the American legal system, judges have something called absolute judicial immunity. It's a protection that dates back centuries and exists for one reason: to ensure that judges can make decisions based on the law and the facts without fear of retaliation. Without that immunity, judges would be terrified. They would rule however they thought would keep them safe. They'd be influenced by whoever had the power to hurt them. And that's not a judicial system. That's a tool of whoever holds the most power. But Trump either doesn't understand that or simply doesn't care. He's made it crystal clear that he believes judges who rule against him are engaged in some kind of conspiracy. He's called them lunatics. He's called them radical activists. He's accused them of being part of the deep state that's trying to undermine his presidency. And he's decided that the proper response to judicial decisions he disagrees with isn't to appeal them through the legal process. It isn't to respect the separation of powers. It's to have those judges arrested. It's to have them prosecuted. It's to make an example of them so that no other judge dares to stand in his way.
I will tell you, you are not alone. It sure felt like that to lots of people in Wisconsin today. People who showed up outside the federal courthouse in Milwaukee after the judge was arrested. More than 100 people out there today on no notice on a Friday in the middle of the day to spontaneously show up and protest the arrest of this judge in Milwaukee. Just instant reaction to this bright new line that's been crossed by Trump. It's being treated as a crisis by members of Congress, too. This was Maryland Congressman Jamie Raskin today. He said every American should be deeply troubled by this massive escalation. This is an unmistakable descent further into authoritarian chaos. Joining us now is Congressman Raskin of Maryland. He's the top Democrat on the Judiciary Committee. Sir, thank you so much for being here. I know it's a really busy time.
Delighted to be with you, Rachel.
Let me ask you if any of the way that I explained that sort of seems the wrong way around to you, or if it seems like I'm putting the emphasis in the wrong place. It seems to me that Trump having a judge arrested is a reckless and desperate move. It seems to me like, yes, there are connections to previous flashpoints and tensions that Trump has raised in even his first term by trying to put federal immigration agents into state courts. But to me, this mostly just seems crazy.
And this is where the situation goes from alarming to absolutely terrifying, because Trump didn't just make a statement and move on. His allies in Congress immediately jumped into action. A Republican congressman from Texas named Brandon Gill filed formal articles of impeachment against Judge Boasberg, and he filed them literally hours after Trump demanded the judge's arrest. Now, if you think that's a coincidence, I've got some oceanfront property in Arizona to sell you. This was a coordinated attack. Trump made the demand. His congressional allies made it happen, and the message they were sending couldn't have been clearer. If you're a federal judge and you rule against Trump, you won't just face legal challenges. You'll face criminal prosecution. You'll face impeachment. Your career will be destroyed. Your reputation will be trashed. You might even end up in handcuffs. This is authoritarianism 101. This is what dictators do.
Well, I regard it very much within the prism of what we've been dealing with over the last month, which is an intense assault on judicial independence. They have been disobeying federal court orders systematically. They have incurred criminal contempt findings in the courtroom of Judge Boasberg, a conservative Republican judge. They have been demanding the impeachment of judges who rule against the lawlessness of the Trump administration. There are now more than 90 preliminary injunctions and temporary restraining orders against the chaos that's been unleashed on the country by the Trump administration. And now they're arresting judges. And the first felony criminal charge brought against Judge Hannah Dugan in Wisconsin is interfering with a legal proceeding, which is essentially what they've been doing all along, what Judge Boasberg
They use the power of the state to punish anyone who tries to check their authority. They intimidate judges. They threaten prosecutors. They turn the legal system into a weapon against their enemies. And it's happening right now in the United States of America, not some distant dictatorship, not some struggling democracy in a developing nation. Right here, right now. And here's what makes the situation even more disturbing. Legal scholars are describing this as a constitutional firestorm. They're using terms like unprecedented, dangerous, authoritarian, and they're not being hyperbolic, they're being accurate, because when you have the executive branch openly threatening to arrest members of the judicial branch for doing their jobs, you're not just having a political disagreement, you're watching the collapse of the separation of powers. You're watching the fundamental structure of American government being dismantled piece by piece. And what's happening isn't just Trump running his mouth on social media. We've moved way past that. Under Attorney General Pam Bondi, Trump's Department of Justice has been actively threatening judges with criminal prosecution. Bondi went on national television and basically admitted it. She said they were sending a very strong message. What message? The message is that if you rule against the administration, if you find Trump's actions unconstitutional, if you dare to be an independent judge, you could be charged with obstruction. You could be charged with conspiracy. You could end up facing federal prosecution. That's the message. And when the Attorney General says something like that, judges have to take it seriously. She controls the FBI. She controls U.S. South attorneys. She has the power to make those threats real. Now, let's be clear about something. The Constitution gives federal judges lifetime tenure for a reason. It gives them protections that most government employees don't have, because the founders understood something crucial. The judiciary needs to be independent. It needs to be free from political pressure. It needs to be able to rule against the president, against Congress, against anyone, without fear of retaliation. That's what makes the American legal system work. That's what makes America different from countries where judges serve at the pleasure of whoever holds power. But Trump is systematically dismantling that independence. He's using threats, intimidation, and the machinery of the executive branch to bring the judiciary to heel. And if he succeeds, if the judiciary becomes just another arm of the executive branch, then we no longer have a constitutional republic. We have something else entirely. And here's the part that should keep every American up at night. Trump's FBI director, a man named Kash Patel, has taken this intimidation campaign to a whole new level. According to multiple reports, Patel used social media to publicize the actual arrest of another federal judge. This judge was in Wisconsin. Her name was Hannah Dugan. And the circumstances of her arrest are murky, but what's absolutely clear is that Patel made a spectacle of it. He posted about it. He turned it into a propaganda victory. And the message to every other judge in the country was unmistakable. Look at what happened to her. Look at what the FBI did. You could be next. Rule against Trump, and this is what you get. The legal community responded with shock and alarm. Judges across the country are terrified. They're not saying it publicly, not most of them anyway, because they're afraid. But behind the scenes, according to legal advocacy groups and lawyers who work closely with the federal judiciary, judges are scared. They're looking over their shoulders. They're wondering whether the FBI might show up at their courthouse. They're wondering whether some lawmaker is going to file impeachment articles against them. They're wondering whether the Attorney General is going to charge them with a crime. And some of them, according to legal experts, are changing their behavior. They're self-censoring. They're avoiding cases that might put them in Trump's crosshairs. They're ruling more favorably to the administration than they otherwise would. That's what intimidation does. It doesn't just affect the targets. It affects everyone else who sees what happens to the targets. The situation with Judge Boasberg is just the most visible example of what's been happening across the federal judiciary. But to understand the full scope of what's at stake, you need to understand the bigger picture. You need to understand that this isn't just about one judge or one ruling. This is about the systematic dismantling of judicial independence. It's about a president who sees the courts not as a co-equal branch of government, but as an obstacle to be removed. It's about an executive branch that has decided that the rule of law is whatever the president says it is, and anyone who disagrees deserves to be punished. Let's step back and look at the legal principle that Trump is attacking. Judicial immunity isn't some obscure technicality. It's absolutely fundamental to how the American legal system works. Federal judges can't be sued for their rulings. They can't be prosecuted for their rulings. That's not because judges are above the law in some general sense. It's because the entire point of the judiciary is to be independent. If a judge could be arrested every time they made an unpopular decision, they wouldn't be judges. They'd be political functionaries. They'd be servants of whoever held power. And that's exactly what Trump wants. He wants judges who will rubber stamp whatever he does. He wants a judiciary that exists to validate his actions, not to challenge them. And what's terrifying is that he's figuring out how to make that happen. He's using the tools of the state to create fear. He's using arrests, prosecution threats, and impeachment articles to pressure judges into submission. And it's working. According to lawyers who work with the federal judiciary, some judges are actively avoiding cases that involve Trump or his policies. They're finding ways to recuse themselves. They're finding procedural reasons not to hear cases. They're doing whatever they can to stay out of Trump's crosshairs. And the judges who do take on these cases are doing so knowing that they could become targets. They know that their careers could be destroyed. They know that they could be arrested. And they have to make the calculation every single day about whether upholding the Constitution is worth the personal and professional cost. Now, Chief Justice John Roberts made an extraordinary move in response to all of this. Roberts is not someone who speaks out publicly. He's cautious. He's measured. He's historically avoided commenting on political matters because he believes the judiciary should stay out of politics. But this situation was so serious that Roberts felt compelled to break his silence. He issued a public statement slamming Trump's attacks on judicial independence, and he didn't pull any punches. He said Trump's threats represented a fundamental attack on the constitutional order. He warned that if judges can be removed for their rulings, the entire constitutional structure collapses. And he made it clear that the Supreme Court and the broader judiciary would resist these efforts. But here's the thing. What can the Supreme Court actually do? They can issue rulings. They can say Trump's actions are unconstitutional. They can order him to stop. But if Trump ignores those rulings, if he arrests the judges who issue them, then what? The Supreme Court doesn't have an army. They don't have the power to enforce their decisions. They rely on the executive branch to follow the law. And when the executive branch is the one breaking the law, when the president is the one threatening judges, the courts are essentially helpless. They can issue all the rulings they want, but if no one enforces them, they're just words on paper. And Trump knows that. That's what makes this moment so dangerous. Trump is testing whether the judiciary has any real power to constrain him. He's betting that if he's aggressive enough, if he makes enough threats, if he actually arrests enough judges, the courts will back down. The judges will stop ruling against him. They'll stop standing in his way. And if he's right, if that strategy works, then the United States has fundamentally changed. We've moved from a system with checks and balances to a system where the president's will is supreme. That's not a constitutional republic anymore. That's an autocracy. That's a dictatorship. That's what this is really about. And let's talk about the specifics of what Trump is doing. This isn't vague or theoretical. He's demanded the arrest of a sitting federal judge. His allies in Congress have filed impeachment articles against that judge. His attorney general has threatened judges with criminal prosecution. His FBI director has publicized the arrest of another judge as a warning. This is happening right now. These aren't hypothetical scenarios. These aren't worst-case predictions. This is the reality of American politics in 2025. And the response from the legal community has been one of alarm. Chief Justice Roberts has spoken out. Legal advocacy groups have issued statements condemning what's happening. Lawyers are organizing. Judges are talking to each other about what to do. But the question remains, what can they actually do? Some judges are standing firm. They're continuing to issue rulings based on the law, regardless of the threats. They're speaking out publicly about the intimidation they're facing. They're refusing to be intimidated. And those judges deserve enormous credit because they're putting themselves at real risk. They know what's happening. They know about the arrests. They know about the impeachment articles. They know about the prosecution threats. And they're still doing their jobs. That's courage. That's commitment to the Constitution. But not every judge is standing firm. Some are self-censoring. Some are avoiding cases. Some are ruling more favorably to the administration than they otherwise would. And you can't blame them. The threats are real. The risks are real. And when you're a judge with a family to support and a career to protect, the calculation isn't always easy. And that's exactly what Trump wants. He doesn't need to arrest every judge. He doesn't need to prosecute every judge. He just needs to create enough fear that judges start to police themselves. He needs to create a climate where judges know that ruling against him carries consequences. And once that climate exists, the judiciary effectively becomes an extension of the executive branch. Judges might still be called judges. They might still wear robes and sit in courtrooms, but they'll be making decisions based on fear, not on the law. They'll be protecting themselves, not the Constitution. Let's talk about what this means for ordinary Americans. Because when you hear about constitutional crises and judicial independence, it can feel abstract. It can feel like something that happens in Washington, far away from your everyday life. But it's not abstract. It affects everyone. When judges lose their independence, everyone's rights become vulnerable. If you're accused of a crime, you want an independent judge who will ensure you get a fair trial. You don't want a judge who's terrified of the president and will rule however keeps them out of trouble. If your rights are violated by the government, you want an independent judge who will hold the government accountable. You don't want a judge who knows that ruling against the government could get them arrested. If you're in a lawsuit against a powerful entity, you want an independent judge who will decide based on the law and facts. You don't want a judge who's influenced by threats and political pressure. Judicial independence isn't some abstract legal concept. It's the thing that protects your rights. It's the thing that ensures the government can't just do whatever it wants. It's the thing that makes America different from countries where the courts serve the ruler, and Trump is destroying it. Now let's consider where this all goes from here. Because the current situation is bad, it's unprecedented, it's terrifying, but the future could be even worse if something doesn't change. We're standing at a crossroads. On one path, judicial and judges continue to rule based on the law. The threats don't work. The arrests stop. The impeachment articles go nowhere. And the United States remains a constitutional republic with real checks and balances. On the other path, the intimidation succeeds. Judges back down. The judiciary becomes an arm of the executive branch, and the United States becomes something else entirely. What happens next depends on a few different factors. It depends on whether Trump actually follows through with more arrests. It depends on whether Congress stands up to him or continues to enable him. It depends on whether the courts resist or fold. It depends on whether the public pays attention and demands accountability. And right now, the signals are mixed. Some judges are resisting, some members of Congress are speaking out, some legal groups are fighting back. But the pressure isn't letting up. Trump is continuing to attack judges. His allies are continuing to file impeachment articles. The DOJ is continuing to threaten prosecution. The FBI is continuing to publicize arrests. And if nothing changes, if the pressure continues to build, at some point something will give. One scenario is that judges start to back down more obviously. We'll start seeing more rulings that favor Trump. We'll see judges finding ways to avoid cases that might put them in Trump's crosshairs. We'll see the judiciary become less independent, less willing to check executive power. And once that process starts, it becomes very difficult to reverse. Once judges are afraid to rule against the president, they'll stay afraid. The only way to restore independence would be a massive public outcry, some kind of political intervention that makes judges feel safe again. And given how polarized the country is, that seems unlikely. Another scenario is that judges resist more aggressively. They keep issuing rulings against Trump. They dare him to arrest them. They force a constitutional crisis where the whole country has to decide whether we support judicial independence or executive supremacy. This would be courageous, but it would also be incredibly risky. Because Trump has shown he's willing to follow through on his threats. He's shown that he'll use the power of the state to punish his opponents. Judges who resist could end up in handcuffs, they could end up prosecuted, they could end up impeached. And once one judge is actually arrested for a ruling, the crisis becomes even more acute. A third scenario involves Congress intervening. Congress has the power to pass legislation protecting judges from political prosecutions. They could refuse to confirm Trump's judicial nominees unless he stops threatening the judiciary. They could use their impeachment power against Trump instead of against judges. But all of this requires Republicans in Congress to stand up to Trump. It requires them to put the Constitution ahead of party loyalty. And based on everything we've seen over the past decade, that seems unlikely. Most Republicans have been unwilling to cross Trump even on issues far less serious than this. They've supported him through scandals, through criminal convictions, through impeachments. It's hard to imagine them suddenly growing a spine now. A fourth scenario involves the Supreme Court issuing a definitive ruling defending judicial independence. They could make it clear that arrests and prosecutions of judges for their rulings will not be tolerated. They could issue a strong opinion that establishes firm legal protection for judges. This would be the strongest institutional response, but it requires the case to actually get to the Supreme Court, and it requires enforcement. If Trump simply ignores the Supreme Court ruling, then what? The court can issue all the opinions it wants, but if no one enforces them, they're meaningless. And then there's the most terrifying scenario. Trump succeeds. He creates a judiciary that's completely subordinate to the executive branch. Judges rule the way he wants them to. Anyone who doesn't gets arrested, gets prosecuted, gets impeached. The separation of powers is gone. The checks and balances are gone, and the United States has transformed from a constitutional republic into something much closer to an elected dictatorship. This sounds like a longism. But remember, not that long ago, the idea of a president demanding the arrest of a federal judge seemed impossible too. Now it's happening. We need to look at the historical parallels because they're deeply unsettling. In Nazi Germany, judges who opposed Hitler were removed or worse. In Stalinist Russia, judges served the party. In modern authoritarian states like Russia and China, the judiciary is controlled by the executive. Independent judges don't exist. And that's what Trump is trying to create in America. He wants an American version of that model, where judges serve the president rather than the Constitution. The American founders designed our system specifically to prevent this. They created lifetime tenure for federal judges. They made impeachment difficult, requiring conviction by the Senate. They created judicial independence as a core constitutional principle because they understood that without an independent judiciary, liberty cannot be protected. If the president controls the courts, the president can do anything, can violate any right, can ignore any constitutional limit because there's no check, no recourse. The courts just rubber stamp whatever the president wants. This is about more than Trump. This is about whether the American constitutional system survives, whether we still have separation of powers, whether judges can still check executive overreach. These are foundational questions. And Trump's attacks on judges, his attempts to arrest them, prosecute them, impeach them, they threaten the answers to those questions. They threaten to fundamentally transform America from a constitutional republic into an elected dictatorship. So let me leave you with this. Donald Trump is attempting to arrest federal judges who rule against him. He's demanded the arrest of Judge James Boasberg. His congressional allies filed impeachment articles. His attorney general is threatening judges with criminal prosecution. His FBI director has arrested at least one judge and publicized it as a warning. This is an unprecedented assault on judicial independence. A direct attack on the separation of powers. Chief Justice Roberts has publicly condemned it. Legal groups have sounded alarms. Judges are terrified. And America is facing a constitutional crisis. Because if Trump succeeds, if judges back down or get arrested, then we no longer have an independent judiciary. We no longer have checks on executive power. We've moved from constitutional democracy toward authoritarianism. And that transformation is happening right now in real time with massive stakes for every American. This story is developing. More judges may be arrested. More impeachment articles may be filed. And at some point, there will be a showdown, a moment where we find out whether judicial independence survives or collapses. Whether America remains a nation of laws or becomes a nation where the president's will is supreme. Stay informed. Understand what's at stake. Because the future of American democracy hangs in the balance. What happens with these judge arrests, how Congress responds, how courts resist, how the public reacts, that will determine what kind of country we become.